Thank you. Welcome to the Wolfeboro ZBA, June 5th, 2023. My name's Audrey Klein. I'm the chairperson. The roll call, I'll introduce for the roll call, Suzanne Ryan, vice chairman, Sarah Silk, the clerk, Luke Freudenberg, member, Chuck Sumner, member, alternate Sabette Stroman, and alternate Kate McMahon. We have a minute taker, Livia Nicolosu, thank you, here with us tonight. The first thing I will ask is, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to change the order of the agenda. If the board is so willing, I'd like to place the Klein hearing first, or the Klein matter first. The issue of the garage second. The, was it the?
Are you going to go in order? You just move the last one up to the top? Or did you have other changes?
I don't have the agenda in front of me. Thanks.
It sounds like you'd just like to move matter D up to the top.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Oh, speak into that.
Roll call vote? Yeah, I'm in favor.
Yes. You
Yes.
have to ask because you have to.
Well, you're the chairman. I'm not chairing this part.
She can't be chair of this.
This is just for the agenda. You're
Yeah, she
doing that
can.
part.
Oh, okay.
Here we go again.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I'm going to recuse myself because this matter concerns me, and the vice chair will take over this case from here.
Okay. Okay. This is in a case that involved an appeal from Ms. Klein relevant to the planning board. And we have sent for legal advice as to how to proceed. What I have put together is a chronological bullet item of how this event took place. There was a meeting whereby there was a tie vote and relevant to Klein, and it was determined by the attorney that that vote was invalid. So therefore, we had to do that portion of the meeting over again. And we elected officers, and we let the Klein issue sit on the back burner until we got counsel's advice. So tonight, I'm just going to go through the chronological happenings, and then the next thing we will have to do is decide if we want to release the legal information, because that was confidential, and then the last thing we'd have to do in the matter of Klein is to determine if we are going to hear her request for a rehearing. So let me begin with the events. On January 4th, Ms. Klein submitted to the ZBA a request for administrative decision made by the Planning Board on December 20th, 22. On February 6, 23, public hearing not open, board took attorney's advice and did not take jurisdiction, but determined board wanted to talk to counsel. The meeting was then closed upon Austin's advice rather than continued. Klein was in the audience. No official meeting date was set. On March 6, 23, public hearing clerk read legal notice. The hearing was not opened. The board voted it did not have jurisdiction. The ZBA motion was to deny to hear the case upon legal advice due to the board's lack of jurisdiction. Klein not in audience. Notice of decision filed 20 days late. On March 31st, 23, Klein submitted a request for motion for rehearing to hear her administrative appeal from the Planning Board decision of December 20th, 22. On April 3rd, 23, the ZBA voted to deny a rehearing, citing prior advice from counsel on the board's inability to hear such an appeal and determined in the original motion of March 6 dismissed. On April 3rd, a question of vote to adjourn. Due to the confusion of administration of the motion to adjourn, I requested the then-sitting acting chair, Ms. Silk, request permission to seek legal advice from our attorney on the vote that was adjourned, which she did as time was of the essence, as there is a 30-day appeal process was about to expire. On April 20th, 23, which was a scheduled work session, Ms. Silk reported attorney's advice was that the vote taken technically to adjourn the meeting, therefore, all votes must be retaken. It was voted that due to administrative lack of or incorrect legal notice that to cure the errors, the ZBA administration must renotice. Said meeting or hearing will be June 5th, allowing time for the board members to submit in writing to Ryan questions on Klein's notice for rehearing to be forwarded to council. The board deferred any and all revotes until May 1st. On May 1st, work session, election of officers the offices remained the same and were voted in, and moved alternate Chuck Sumner up as a full voting member. Tavis posted June Klein legal notice for meeting in paper, or will it be entitled a hearing? So most of what I read to you was not televised. That's why I went through the litany of what the steps were. So the questions were forwarded to council, and they were quite substantial, quite a few. We got back what I thought to be a very thorough review. I hope the board members had a chance to look at it all and agree that it was very thorough. But the thing that we have to do now is determine the legal advice that we got from attorney Christine Johnston. Do we want to release that partially or wholly to the public? I'd like some discussion on that.
I see no reason not to release all the information to the public.
Okay,
I agree.
all right, so
Can I ask, historically, what do you normally do in a situation
each
like
board
this?
makes up its own determination.
Yeah. I see nothing here that we couldn't release at this time because it was procedural.
Kate? Okay, so I would make a motion then that we release this information to the public, the document as printed.
Second.
All those in favor, roll call?
Yes.
Sarah, yes?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And by the way, I need to appoint an alternate in place of Audrey Klein. Kate, I think you heard this case last? Yes. Okay, so I appoint you in place of Audrey. And what's your vote on releasing this?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so it's
Kate, could you get a little
unanimous.
closer to your mic so we can hear you?
Yeah.
What?
Talking to the mic.
I asked if Kate could get closer to her mic so we can hear her down on this end of the table.
Okay, so now that we all have this in front of us, I think what we need to do is summarize some of what was said. I have a copy for Klein. The public is welcome to a copy. They can see Tavis at any time that his office hours are open and get a copy. I think the crux of the question was, does the attorney's position change from when she said we did not have jurisdiction over this subject matter? And her answer was no, her position does not change, and she does not think we should rehear. And she outlined, which I think is important for the public to hear some of, she said, let's see, the ZBA has the jurisdiction to hear and decide an appeal of the planning board construction, interpretation, or application of the terms of the zoning ordinance in the course of its legislative function of proposing zoning amendments. My opinion is that it does not, and that's the crux, I think, of Ms. Klein's appeal. As explained more fully below, I'm having trouble seeing. As explained more fully below, there is no statute expressly granting the ZBA this authority, and I do not believe that such authority is necessarily implied in any statute that grants authority to the ZBA. Zoning boards of adjustments are created by statute and have only those powers that are expressly conferred on them by the statute or which are necessarily implied by the statute. And there's a case cited here. And the first place to look for ZBA authority is in the specific statute that grants the ZBA its various powers. And she lists 13 statutes which cover a great range of items that we are allowed to weigh in on, and this Klein case is not one of them. So, to get back to Klein's case, which was case 01AAD23, request of appeal of Article 9, Amendment Number 8, as printed in the 12/20/22 Town of Wolfeboro Planning Board proposed zoning amendment, and it was determined by council we don't have the authority. Klein then appealed to us for a rehearing on that decision, and at this time, I would like a motion from somebody to either grant a rehearing or not grant a rehearing.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we decline the motion for rehearing based on advice from Town Attorney Christine Johnston.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
What the motion is?
Discussion on that?
Suzanne, can you say what the motion is again?
To deny based on attorney's advice.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
And I think we've had a number of legal opinions, and I think it's pretty clear that it's just not within our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
And it should rightfully not, it should, rightfully should be denied.
Okay. Roll call vote. I'm going to start over with you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
No.
Aye, yes.
Okay, so it's 4-1. 4 in favor, 1 opposed. Let the record show. At this point, I'll turn the meeting back over to Ms. Klein.
Thank you. Sarah, do you have a statement?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would just like to acknowledge that at the April 3rd meeting, in a case of extreme astonishment, I made the mistake of having a lapse of decorum, for which I want to apologize.
Any other comments on Sarah's statement?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
It was a very frustrating meeting, in part because we only got the material given to us moments before the meeting opened, and I share her frustration, but didn't express it that way.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay. We can move on to the first case tonight. Sarah, will you please read which would be number A?
Yes. Thomas Tobin, 8 Port Wedland Road, tax map number 187-27, case 02-V-23. Public hearing for a variance under Chapter 175, Section 80A, 2 and 3 of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow a variance for side and rear setback for a detached garage. This property is located at 8 Port Wedland Road. Formal submission, public hearing. Site visit to be held at 5 p.m. At 5 p.m., we did indeed have a site viewing. Present from the ZBA was Chuck, Suzanne, Sarah, Luke, and Audrey. Kate was excused. The group looked at stakes for the proposed garage. They also explored boundary on the left side of the lot. The lot line appeared to be angled, and it seemed to be positioned from, the stakes were positioned from a survey from the neighbor. There doesn't appear to be a survey for this lot.
So we will take testimony from the applicant. The board will then ask questions of the applicant. We'll open up the public hearing for people who would like to speak in favor or oppose to the application. We'll close the public hearing and deliberate amongst the board members, and then most likely make a decision tonight. If not, it will be continued to the next hearing. So, hello, could you state your name? Are you close enough to the, can you all hear it back there? Okay, you have to really put that mic pretty close.
It's not on.
Nope.
Hello? There we go.
Hello.
Again, I'm still Tom Tobine from 8 Port Wedland Road. We're asking to build a garage on our property, simple 16 wide, 28 feet long. As my wife will attest, I have a lot of tools, and I need to put them someplace. We have a back lot that's well off the street that by going to the back, we go beyond the 25-foot setback that's allowed in the neighborhood currently. When the neighborhood was built, the setbacks in that area were about 10 feet. Houses were positioned at that time, and when you go to do something in your property, you bump into the new setbacks. I try to position the house the garage in a place that didn't interfere with anybody's line of sight. I'm not using it for business. It's just a storage area. We have an area next to it that is part of my septic field, so I can't interrupt that. And then the other half of the backyard is actually a claim space for future septic if the first one fails. And I have a registered septic site plan with the state for that claimed area. So I can't go over and build on top of that anyways. It does go in line with the side driveway that I have, and just hoping that you guys see fit to allow.
Would you walk us through the 5 criteria and your arguments why this variance request meets those criteria?
I don't have those in front of me right now. Thank you. So it says the variance is not contrary to the public interest because, and I put down, the location of the structure will not block anybody's view or encroach upon any neighboring structure. It's located well back away from the road. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. This garage is a simple structure matching the existing home in use for vehicle storage. It mimics many other properties in the neighborhood. Most of our neighborhood is a non-conforming lots in the neighborhood. It's just, it was a private neighborhood when it was built, and then we turned it into public streets at some point in time, and at that point, we had to observe new rules and regulations, but these structures were already in place. And I think there's a lot of people that have come and received variances to put up a structure like this in the neighborhood because you just can't build on the property without one. Substantial justice is done. Even though we're requesting encroachment on 2 parcels, the back property line is a stone wall against a wooded area. The back of that belongs to the church that's behind me, but there's a good distance between us, and it's all treed. The side property line faces a scrub brush area, and it's treed and shared by between number 8, my lot, and number 6, the neighbor's lot. He does have a building there, a garden shed that it would just be in the same location, but it wouldn't harm anything that I could see. And the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. As I said, most of the lots in the neighborhood are non-conforming. We have, I think, lot line issues all the time, but I don't think I'm encroaching in anybody's, to hurt anybody else's property. So. Special conditions of the property, the location of the garage, as I said, is a level area. It doesn't require me to add a lot of fill or cut any more trees. And I have the claimed septic space. I can't use the other side of my property. It's actually the only area that I could put it because of the way the lot is designed. Many properties in the area are non-conforming, as I said, and we're fighting the setback requirements. The proposed location is far back from the street. It's far from the neighbors, and as possible as it can be, it doesn't interfere with any current septic design, and it doesn't encroach any claim space. So this is a pretty simple little garage, and I'm not trying to do anything special there except store my equipment, store my truck.
Do you have a copy of that septic design, the replacement system?
I have a number, it's on the, when I put in for a building permit, the attachment on the building permit has that number on it, but I don't have that with me, no.
The number is noted on his sketch.
Is it on the sketch? I wasn't sure if it was.
Yes, CA 2008094633. I assume it was done in 2008.
Yes.
We don't have a copy of that in our file.
Probably not, no.
It was registered and stamped with the state.
Right, I just would be interested in seeing, this one is from, dink, dink, dink. Oh, does that say 2008?
It's either 6 or 8.
I guess this must be it. It does say 2008.
Yeah, because the only other one is 1975 or something like that.
So I certainly don't disagree that probably if you had to get a new design, which you would have to because this one's expired, if your system failed, you'd need a new design. They would probably require it to be in the very same spot.
Mm-hmm.
But what this shows is that alongside that property line is poorly drained soils. And I don't see that you have a setback to those. And those require a 30-foot setback?
Yep.
You're talking for the septic design?
No, I'm talking for construction near poorly drained soils.
Oh.
My guess is the building permit application submitted doesn't have the poorly drained soils on it.
No, it absolutely doesn't.
Right.
Right, but this does. So without actually going through the 5 criteria and, talking about whether or not they meet those, there's an outstanding issue with the setback to the poorly drained soil that, right at this point, in my mind, kind of supersedes the other information.
So what is the requirement?
Tavis, what would he need to do?
The first thing to do would be to delineate and make sure the wetland is still there, determine if it's poorly drained or very poorly drained, and then apply for those setbacks. If it were construction, it would probably be a use not listed and be a special use permit through the planning board to be in the setback or the buffer.
So that's a special use within the buffer and not a variance?
But he'd still need a variance for building setback.
Oh, no, I meant a variance for the wetland setback. That's a special use permit.
So based
Would
on
anybody else on the board?
based on the information tonight, if the board were to grant a variance, we'd still have to go back and verify the wetland information. Then he may need to go to the planning board prior to construction.
Gotcha. Does anybody else want to look at the septic plan?
Where did you find the information about the poorly drained soil? Was that
It's
in
in
our
our
packet?
regulations.
I mean, was that in our packet, though, about his,
No,
that's
it's
part
in
of
the
problem.
about
drawing.
his property? Oh, that's part of the problem. We
you wanna
didn't
see
have that
this?
This
information?
is part of the property folder,
Okay.
the historic property folder on the septic design that was built in 2008.
Shouldn't that have been part of what we looked at?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, all right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Because, well, we were out there in the field, there seemed to be some uncertainty about the property line on the left-hand side of the lot, which is where we're looking at an 11 and a 14-foot distance to the property line rather than the required 20. I just think that perhaps we need a survey for this particular lot due to the fact that we can't clearly determine where the line is. He's done the best he can to mark it based on someone else's survey. But the sketch showed a very angled line, and when it was checked, the GIS showed a very cubic lot. And it's such an old subdivision. There seems to be, a lot of issues with the accuracy there.
Are you done?
Yep.
Too often we go through this, we get submitted to us a sketch without enough adequate information. We have a checklist, we have an application form. One of the things that strikes me right off is there isn't even a north arrow on here, I don't believe. It puts the applicant in a position that's certainly uncomfortable, but there should have been more information given to us on this site. There are times that we have required a survey, but we certainly need a better depiction of what's going on there than this.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Also, not shown on the map is an additional shed, pre-existing, that should probably be shown if there was a survey. And I did note that in the planner review, there was a notification that the overhang, building overhang encroachment needed to be added to the plan. And so I guess I have a question as to whether the 16 wide by 28 long, is that just the footprint of the base of the building, or does that include the overhang?
It's a
encroachment?
footprint.
Okay,
It's a footprint.
okay.
Yes, Luke?
So my question would be, he could go back and have a wetland scientist delineate the wetlands. The wetland scientist could also probably identify the property lines fairly accurately, as opposed to putting them through a survey would be, if the wetlands are an issue going forward, that would be the first thing to really figure out as the applicant, if that's what we're asking him to do, is because it's showing 56 feet on that one side from the septic system, current septic system, to poorly drained. So would that be the recommendation? Is that where we're kind of going with this? Is that, and just thinking out loud? Because Sarah brought up, or Suzanne or Sarah brought up the property line that's not formally delineated. And then, obviously, you brought up the poorly drained soils on that one side. So would that be the advice to the applicant at this point, or?
Well, I think probably the advice should come from staff, but I think that if the variance was denied, there'd be no need for him to go do anything else. So keeping in mind, whether it's approved or denied, the wetlands would be probably the second question. However, I think there is question about there's conflicting numbers in the file for the setback. So that's something that we'd talk about during the variance stage, I think.
I don't have a problem going through the 5 criteria and either approving it or denying it without prejudice. I think there's other issues with this proposal, and it's not just the wetland.
Can I remove it without prejudice?
Without prejudice, well,
You have to vote.
Generally, we do that so that somebody can reapply with additional, more detailed or different information if
Well,
we
I've
deny
just
it
written down about
without
6
prejudice.
things that you're looking for here.
Okay. Well, Chuck, do you want to weigh in on the piece of paper you're holding, and then you can pass it back this way? If you have anything to say
Well,
about that?
Yeah, it does clearly show, and we saw on that side of the property, we saw it was slightly lower. There was a little depression there, so I suppose it could have been,
Right.
at one time, it could have been poorly drained or wetlands.
I mean, just from knowing the area, the church has a large vernal pool, actually, in their front yard, which this wet area may or may not drain into. I think it probably does, or it goes the other way. But I don't think that this is just an isolated runoff from, his driveway or something. I think this is part of a bigger system. But I'm not a wetland scientist, so that's,
So I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. What do you think it is?
I think it's part of a bigger wetland system because the
Okay.
lot next door, the church, has a large
vernal
wetland
pool.
area.
Yeah, I heard that part, yes.
Right.
That vernal pool actually drains between the 00 lot, which is the first lot on the street,
Yep.
and number 6. There's a old waterway there.
Yep.
It really doesn't come over to my property.
So it goes that way?
It's between 00 and number 6. So it's actually in line with the vernal pool, which is at the front of the church. And it cuts across the street and goes behind number 4, I think it is, Port Wedland. This is just an area we blow leaves in. It's not like I have a puddle there even. It's just,
It's damp. I walked in it. I mean, it was identified as poorly drained soil. I think that's probably correct, although I'm not a wetland scientist.
Audrey? If memory serves me, that's an old subdivision with inherent problems. And one of the problems is the drainage along that road from that subdivision, for which now the town is discussing a very expensive project to rectify the drainage in that area, for which that subdivision caused. And when we were leaving, we saw a drainage pipe on the property across the street, so there is a drainage issue, but I again say that that's primary, but there is other secondary issues with this application and the garage.
Did you want to look at this anymore?
I guess my question is if the applicant could have the ability, he's heard a list of things already, the applicant has the ability to say, I withdraw this case tonight, I want to go back and do a little bit more due diligence, get a wetland scientist, have those poorly drained soils examined, or non-poorly drained soils, and then come back to us. He can do that, certainly, he can withdraw his case. I think it's just, I think we have an obligation to provide some guidance too. So if, for my question would be to Suzanne, would you feel more comfortable setting the applicant back and getting a more detailed drawing, or do you feel like some of the things that you're going to bring up are going to outweigh whatever could be brought forward anyways?
At this point, I do.
Okay.
Well, could you share that with him? Is it something he can go
Not
back
now.
and?
That's a matter of
Not
going
now.
through the 5
Yeah.
criteria.
Yeah.
So I think.
That's why I was
Yeah.
suggesting we go through the 5 criteria.
Right. I want to also point out that the application for the farmer's porch in 2021, the distances to that sideline are not the same as this drawing. So, there's another conflict there. So I think that the site, should this be approved, the site does need to be, pretty accurately determined.
Well, if it should be approved, one of the conditions would be as an as-built plan be presented.
More than an as-built. Oh, you mean as-built before it gets built? Yes. Not as-built after it gets built?
No.
Okay. So are we in agreement we should go through the 5 criteria? Or do you have another suggestion, Luke?
I think maybe it'll give the applicant more clarity if we do go through it, and then if he wants to withdraw at that point, he can still do that.
Okay.
Audrey, Tavis has his hand up.
I'm just wondering if the board thinks it's going to be opening the public hearing or going through the criteria just for assistance in the board, or the assistance of the applicant in anticipation of withdrawal and reapplication.
Say that again?
Is the board planning on opening the public hearing or simply going through the criteria to
Does it-
provide information to the applicant so that he can consider withdrawing?
Does it matter?
Yeah.
It does?
Yeah,
Why?
but you already opened the public hearing by virtue of him reading the 5 criteria.
Just wondering. Or if there's people sitting here that are waiting to speak and then not to be heard, you might want to say, we're not going to vote.
I don't know why we wouldn't hear the whole, go through the whole application with the 5 criteria and public input. I mean, the applicant can withdraw at any time.
Yep.
That's right. He can withdraw any time.
So, let's,
Let me
I think
do
we
you a
should-
favor.
I think we should go through the criteria. If
Okay.
it gets denied, it would be without prejudice, and if he has new information and can support a new application, then he can submit a new application.
right, and it would be different because the lot information would be different,
It'd be a lot different.
be clearer.
Let me
right.
do you a favor. Let me withdraw solely because by the time I get a wetland scientist or someone to survey my lot, it's going to cost more than putting up the garage.
So
So-
even if it were approved, that's not something you would
It doesn't
think
sound like it's going to get approved. I think that the discussion is that you're looking for about 6 more things that I didn't show. So if you're going to overlook those, then I probably should withdraw it.
Well, even if it was approved, it would be with the condition that you do all the things that we're talking about.
Okay. All right, then we'll continue.
Okay, who wants to take number 1, comment on the variance will not be contrary to the public interest because,
Oh, wait a minute. Well, we usually combine number 1 and 2,
Okay?
and the spirit of the ordinance observed. The purpose of our zoning ordinance in general is related to the land and the health and safety and welfare of the residents and to promote orderly growth. I'm not so sure, given the wetlands that you pointed out, and that the plan that we see, which has a second garage, is in keeping with the welfare of the neighborhood. And the reason I say that is because here we go with a cumulative effect. At some point, planning boards and zoning boards have to realize that there's this domino effect of approving these things that affect a neighborhood. And you would have a house with an attached garage and then a detached garage in the back. And when we go down through, you'll see that we're required to provide information that it's like something in the neighborhood. In this case, it's not like anything in the neighborhood. So number 1 and number 2, I don't see that they fit the spirit and intent, and it's contrary to the public interest.
Am I allowed to comment?
We're going to have comment from the board first, and
I'm
then
sorry.
you'll be able to,
Okay.
come back. Chuck,
Well,
do you have something to say about that?
I drove, like you, I drove up and down the street a little bit, and there's, several outbuildings, in other yards in the neighborhood. So I don't know that it's going to be unsightly. It is a good-sized garage, but it's a single bay. I assume architecturally it's going to look similar to the house. It's not going to be out of character. And it is set back, well set back from the road, so I don't think it would be objectionable.
I seem to think too that it was a fair number of years ago, but we did approve a garage down around the corner on that same road, and I believe, if memory serves me right, that we approved. There was a permit application that came up for a garage on Keewaydon, where the resident already had a garage that had been converted into living space, I believe. And I believe we approved that garage. I could be mistaken.
Yes, we did.
And that was a very similar lot to this. So I feel like I always err on the side of property rights, and I don't think what the applicant is asking for is, if he was asking for a 2-bay garage and encroaching within the same amount of time, I'd say cut it down to 1 bay and don't encroach as much. But I feel like it's not, in this setting, it's not contrary to the public interest. So I would not agree with those statements. I'd be more open to it than that.
Sarah, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. When we were doing our site walk, he mentioned that the lot to the right of his was taken by the town for taxes, and he was interested in, if it was ever for sale, then he would probably buy it, and he wouldn't have this problem of the boundary line adjustments, and I think in a perfect world, that would be a perfect answer for him. But I know there are very many crowded lots in this particular subdivision, a lot of detached garages, a lot of attached garages, a lot of little sheds and whatnot, and it's a slippery slope. You get this proliferation, and then it's not outside of in keeping with the neighborhood, because the whole neighborhood has these crowded lots then. But it's one of those things where it then compounds errors, and they have drainage problems, and so it's kind of a slippery slope, and it's always a quandary for me, because I can totally understand the desire to have the garage. I'm not sure what he uses his other garage for. But at the same time, it severely crowds these lots where they already have drainage problems. So I'm not sure it follows the spirit of the ordinance.
That exemplifies what I'm saying about the cumulative effect. Not only do you crowd the lot, you crowd the neighborhood. And the next one, and the next one, and the next one, it's cumulative, and that goes against the spirit and intent of zoning, which is setbacks, frontage, lot size, and it's not a big lot.
So the zoning talks to how dense the buildings are together and setting standards for how dense certain neighborhoods are wanting to be, how close together the buildings can be to the lot line. And about maybe 10 years ago, the sideline setbacks and back setbacks were changed in this zone from 10 feet to 20 feet and 25 feet. Those changes were reviewed and put on a warrant article by the planning board and voted in by the residents because it was felt that more space was needed in the district that this neighborhood is in. And a lot of the reason for this neighborhood is for the drainage, and for other neighborhoods it's for other reasons. But when we look at what's already there, many of these buildings are considered legally non-conforming. They were there before the law changed, and therefore they're legal the way they sit, but there was a purpose that the law was changed. It was changed so that that kind of close development wouldn't continue to happen in that neighborhood or in that zone. And that's, with all due respect to property rights are decided by the legislative process through warrant articles and the citizens voting on those. And the only exception to those rules would be the 5 very strict criteria of a variance, which says that it's not legal to do this, but in your case, because you have something really special about your lot, we're going to allow you to do something that's otherwise illegal. So it's not enough to say that the neighborhood looks like it has numbers of other outbuildings or outbuildings close to the line, because those were likely permitted when they were built, or they had a reason for a variance and they were given a variance. But variances each stand on their own. The one that we approved, that you recall, was next to an empty lot, not next to the neighbor's lot, where they may, in fact, want to build up to their line someday down the road. And now we have, again, a cumulative problem if we're overlooking what the zoning allows and not applying the 5 criteria the way that we are supposed to be applying it.
Madam Chair?
I think that's it.
I think also that there's something essential missing here that we don't know at this point, too, and that's whether it is poorly drained soil, in which case it wouldn't be permissible to probably build it there at all, because they wouldn't be able to meet all of those criteria and setbacks.
Okay, we've beat number 1 and 2 to death. How about number 3?
So number 3 goes to is the benefit to the owner substantial, big enough to overturn or overweigh the benefit to the citizens who have voted the zoning in? Is there any harm to the citizens by allowing the benefit to this one variance? So if anybody else would like to speak to that.
Well, I go back to the density issue, and the changes the essential character of the neighborhood. If you allow these to continue to happen, then this is what you're going to get, a changed neighborhood. And it does affect the neighborhood, although I understand the abutter that's most directly affected had not an issue with it. That is not the criteria for which we make our decision. The public could come and say, we love something or we dislike something, and that is not supposed to be the criteria. It's the 5 criteria in front of us. And I see that this does affect the neighborhood, and
So Suzanne, did we hear from the church that they were fine?
did I what?
Did we hear from the church as the abutter that they were okay with it?
Tavis told me.
So, I mean,
Tavis, you mentioned to me in passing that somebody from the neighborhood approached you and said they didn't have an issue, or did they approach him and he told you?
Correct.
So hearsay. At any rate, it doesn't weigh iota on myself and my vote. What?
so let's be clear that neighbors' opinions aren't part of the 5 criteria. They're very important in the planning board process when you're going through development of a commercial property or a multifamily property, then neighborhoods and people who are affected, their opinions should essentially steer that project. But for a variance, we're not allowed to take individual opinions about whether the neighbor likes it or not into account, because the neighbor could sell it, will sell it, the owners will sell it eventually. It's not part of what we are allowed to consider in the 5 criteria. So although we always like to hear from everybody, I just think that people need to be aware that that is not something that we can put a lot of legal weight in.
How about number 4?
Well, let me go back to the substantial justice. I think this really doesn't, the benefit to the owner doesn't overweigh the harm to the public, because this is such a serious drainage area, that in itself, over time, we haven't even solved the problems we've got there now, never mind if it does become a denser neighborhood. And the way to have it become a denser neighborhood is to identify that as a dense neighborhood in our zoning and say, in this area here, we believe that houses should be much closer together because it's a tighter neighborhood, and that's for everybody, not just 1 or 2 people who have, a parcel in that neighborhood. So the drainage is an issue, and I don't think substantial justice, the substantial justice is not beneficial to the property owner. Values of surrounding, this is number 4, values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. Well, I have no, and nothing that says whether it is or isn't, so I guess I can't really say to that.
We usually, unless the applicant or an abutter brings in credentials that say one way or the other, we usually don't weigh in heavily on this number 4.
That's a very difficult question to answer. I couldn't figure out how to answer it either, because I don't have credentials for that. I know it's part of your requirement, but, how do you answer that?
You get a real estate professional to testify, basically, would be the way, if that was, if that was the key point that you needed to make in order to, gain an approval. We would need some testimony from somebody who's in the field of property values. Number 5 is typically the most difficult one, and that is the hardship and special conditions of this property over and above any other property that's in the same neighborhood. Why should this property be granted a variance, which is a permission to do something that's otherwise illegal, rather than other similar properties in the neighborhood? Would anybody like to speak to that?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have to agree with the applicant's part of the special conditions in that he has a substantial, probably about 2/3 of his backyard that is either an active septic system or is set aside, as a replacement septic field. So that portion does kind of restrict where it could be. However, if you look at the sketch that we have, it looks like there could be an avoidance of the 25-foot rear setback. It's show he's going into that area by 13 feet, and I'm not certain that he couldn't move it forwards towards the road and avoid that portion of the variance. And if that lot line on the left is at a sharp angle to the right as depicted here, the closer he gets to the road, the less he's going to be into the side setback as well. But then, like I said earlier, we still have that unknown about the wetland soils.
Well, that would also pull it away from the wetlands, would it not, if it was pulled up towards or attached to the side of the house?
It depends where they are, you know, and we don't have a new report. We don't even have an old report. We just have a reference to it.
Yeah, as to number 5, this is where people get twisted around. It's the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others. And what's being asked of is a garage, which everybody on the street has, but they don't have, not everyone on the street has two. So I don't see anything that distinguishes the property from anyone else in the subdivision in general terms. They all have their septics and their wells where most suitable according to state law. They all have the same frontage that's required. There's nothing that distinguishes it. Sometimes we will say, because the lot has considerable amount of ledge, something has to be done a certain way, or because there's a historic oak tree, nothing else can be done except the way they're presenting it. His wetland is not, that's adjacent to him is no different than a lot of them in that subdivision. That's what's causing us to have to pay to have a whole drainage system put in that subdivision. So there's nothing that is special about that distinguishes it from any other. And then I would go one step further, if I may, to remind the board members when it comes to a vote, if in your mind any one of the 5 does not garner a yes from you, you must say no.
So to reiterate that for the general public, the 5 criteria, each of us has to believe that all 5 criteria are met in order for us to say, yes, we would grant the variance, so, which is what she just expressed. Kate, do you have any comments on this?
Well,
Yeah, can you pull your microphone closer to you?
You have to speak up.
And speak up, yeah.
okay.
Even closer.
Okay,
There
is
you
that
go.
all right? Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. One is this seems to be a neighborhood where there are garages, and they perhaps were erected before the zoning laws changed and the setbacks were changed. I don't know that Mr. Tobine's application would trigger a domino effect of changing the neighborhood if most of the neighborhood is the way he wants his to be, by adding a garage. The only other question that I have is wetlands always seem to be a concern if they're in play anywhere. And my question is, would the proposed garage make any more stress on the area than the active septic field, which is right next door? So I don't know what problems the garage would present that wouldn't already be active with the septic a few feet away, so.
I don't either, and I think that's why it goes for a special use permit, so the planning board can determine what the impact of that is.
Okay.
Is that right, Tavis?
Generally.
Generally. So I understand that you don't really have an answer for that, and neither do I.
Okay, all right. Otherwise, I think that the criteria are pretty well met.
Are you ready to entertain a motion? Oh, no, the public hasn't spoken.
Right. I just want to ask, or point out that I want to reiterate what Sarah said, was that if this garage were pulled forward and attached to the side of the house, it could miss one variance altogether and come really close to not needing much of a variance at all on the sideline, depending on where the sideline is. So the fact that there's another solution rather than the one that's presented makes me feel like the hardship is not there.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And
Microphone.
that's the one I have a hard,
Microphone.
that's the one I have a hard time with, the hardship one. And it's very clear that if there is an alternative solution, there is no hardship, and they cannot meet criteria number 5. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Would you like to respond to any of those before we ask for input from the public?
Well, there was a question about the added garages on other people's properties. There are about 6 that I know of. I was standing here trying to click them off in my head, but there's about 6 that have been allowed in our neighborhood, just similar to what I have, except those are 24 by 24, and one of them is 38 by 48. Mine is going to be very small compared to those. That's my point. To attach it to the house, I'm trying to grow a little more parking space at the same time when I put that drive in. So if I pull the garage up to the front, then I lose the parking for about 3 cars down the side. I didn't think it would hurt anybody out in back where it was. I thought that was the best solution. Attaching it to the house, I think it'll make the house look like a train because it makes it really long at that point. So I actually drew that, and then I decided not to do that because I just didn't like how it made the house look. I don't know. The serious drainage issue you keep bringing up, I represent Port Wedland for that drainage issue. I know a lot about that drainage issue. We had a meeting down there 2 weeks ago with Board of Selectmen and everybody else, and I've been working on it for 10 years with the town, trying to get it remediated. Most of that drainage is on the far side of Port Wedland in the Winter Haven Road area. I don't displace any water that I know of from my lot. My lot's a pretty flat lot, and I think there's other lots like the one next to me that has a water problem, but that doesn't displace any water either. That lot is a conservation lot. I don't know. It's, I thought this would be a simpler process when I came. I've been to other planning boards. I was a contractor for years. I've been to planning boards all over Massachusetts, and the process was, I don't know, maybe simpler. But I'm looking at this, and if I get all these other requirements with it, well, I got a garage that's not worth the money, because I have to invest so much money to try and satisfy the conditions of the property. So it's in your hands. I thank you for your time. And
Tavis, I guess that brings up a question for you. Does paved area require a special use permit if it's within the setback to wetlands?
Driveways are exempt.
Driveways are exempt? That's interesting. Okay, does anybody want to speak in favor of this application? And is anybody here to speak in opposition to the application? Members, do you have any other questions for the applicant before we close the public hearing? Okay. All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion. Does anybody else have anything else they want to deliberate before we accept a motion?
Actually, I do have one point, and that is,
Yes.
Sarah mentioned a slippery slope. If we approve this, then we are on the road to approving others and eventually creating a neighborhood that all of a sudden we realize we don't like anymore. But each one is judged on its own merits, and we can stop that slippery slope at any time. So I'm not sure this is a slippery slope, per se.
So you're right that variances are each based on their own merit? I don't have anything else to add to that.
So on that basis, I agree with Luke that this is extremely similar to one that we approved just last year. And not that I'm trying to create a slippery slope, but
So to me, when I say that variances are each based on their own merits, that also means that you can't judge one against the other because they each have their own individual characteristics.
yes.
So at the same time that you say it can't be a slippery slope, you also can't say, but look, it's the same
but
with
it's
these
similar
other
to another
ones.
one.
right?
Understood.
Okay. That's just my perspective.
But were wetlands involved in the one we approved last year?
I'm sorry, what?
Were wetlands an issue in the one, I remember the property you're talking about from last year, were wetlands an issue? I thought it had more to do with the location of a septic system with the building he was putting up.
I don't believe wetlands were an issue with that. I don't recall that
It
as
was
being part of it.
so it was a separate, it was very different, I think.
As each is supposed to be, yes.
I don't remember.
I think it had to do with the proximity to the septic system that was in the field next door, I thought, but.
All right, are you ready for a motion?
Yes, please.
I would move to deny case number 02V23, variance from Article 175-80, side lot and rear lot setback on tax map 187027 on 13, what's the street?
Port Wetland?
What's the name of the road?
Port Wetland Road.
Port Wetland. Without prejudice, as the 5 criteria were not met.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor of
Could we-
denial?
So
Luke?
what's the motion again, please?
This is a motion to deny.
Tonight, thank you.
Luke,
Without prejudice.
without
Yes.
prejudice?
Yes.
Deny without prejudice? Sarah?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
In the morning.
Sarah, would you like to read case number?
Yes, the next case is Patty and Peter Cook at 6 Varney Road, tax map 203-78-6 Varney Road, case number 04AAD 23, public hearing for appeal of administrative decision, Chapter 175, Section 53.1 of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance for lighting at 6 Varney Road. Formal submission, public hearing, site visit was held at 5:30 p.m. The same members mentioned earlier of the ZBA were present, as was Mr. Cook, Dan Devereaux, an abutter on the other side of the gym, and Charles Simpson, the abutter immediately to the right in the dentist building. It was noted that on the rear of the parking lot for the gym, there is an old halogen, they believe it's a halogen light, on a pole. Luke inspected it, did not seem to have a town pole number. It's not believed to be a town pole. And also on Simpson's lot to the right, sort of in a tree at the back of the lot on the right rear is also a pole, not known by the town.
Just a reminder, if I may, a reminder, when we open the public hearing, you give the opportunity to the public speak first, and then the 5 criteria.
Yeah,
We
typically.
did it kind of backwards.
We did.
Yeah. And I just remind you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just for the general public, our previous case was a variance with 5 criteria, and this case is an appeal of administrative decision, which means that any decision made by an administrative officer in the town of Durham, be it the planning board, the selectman, the code enforcement officer, or the zoning administrator, if somebody believes that their decision is incorrect, that they could come forward for an appeal to that decision, and this board acts as that officer when we're reviewing the information that is given to us to determine whether that decision is correct per the zoning ordinance. So we essentially re-review all the information.
And to that point, I'd like to make a motion that we have jurisdiction over this application for the very reasons you just stated.
So are you making that motion?
Yes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion about this?
Do we have a legal opinion on that?
Not that I'm aware of.
We do.
We do?
We
No,
do?
no, she just stated the reasons why we
No,
have
Oh.
jurisdiction.
No,
I'm
I
saying,
heard
yes, we
that,
do.
but is that accurate is what I'm saying.
Did you read the information that the attorney gave us on Ms. Klein's as to
Yes.
why we do or do not have jurisdiction
Yes.
over? Then,
So we don't have a legal opinion. Do you want to have a discussion about why we might think we do or don't?
Well, do we have, are you saying that we do have legal jurisdiction here, or do not?
In my opinion as a board member, I believe that we do,
You do, okay.
yeah. But others might disagree.
Well, I guess it's,
Madam Chair, I'm actually going to step down from this as a selectman, so I'm going to ask you to appoint someone else.
That's a really good point, Luke. Yes. Who did you sit on the first case of the night as an alternate?
Kate,
Nancy, Sabette, would you care to sit as the alternate on this case in Luke's place?
Sure.
Okay. So Sabette is
Is that a
sitting,
conflict?
I think so.
oh, that's right.
That's a conflict.
Do you think it's a conflict?
I don't think it's a conflict in this particular case, but if there's a question about it, I'd rather let Kate do it.
Does
Suzanne
anybody
looks
on the
like she
board
thinks
feel
it's
that
a
she has a
conflict.
conflict?
I mean, I think everybody knows the cooks, but I am friends with the cooks, but, but if you feel like that's a conflict, then
If I have to put it to a motion, I will, but I think the relationship is very close.
well, then Kate,
and
Kate, would you
best
like to
not
sit as the
that's okay.
alternate?
It only
I'd rather not
jeopardizes-
muddy the water.
Yeah, it would
Okay.
jeopardize.
Let me change that and have Kate sit as the alternate because
leave the
Sabette
table.
has
I have to leave
recused
the table?
herself.
Oh, no, you're not sitting.
I'm not voting.
Yeah, you're not voting anyway. Yeah, right.
Luke recused himself because he's a selectman, and the selectmen have potentially a part to play in this
Yes. But could I
decision.
clarify that as a non-voting member, I do not have to leave the table, and I can still participate in the discussion, correct? Just like any case.
Not if you're recusing.
I
Oh.
think that's true.
So I need to leave?
You have
Yeah.
to step down.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Are we clear? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Mr. Cook, take it
Ready?
away.
Thank you. My name is Peter Cook. I'm here with my wife Patty. We live at 117 North Main Street. I guess I'd like to start by saying that I can't begin to express how truly disappointed we are that we have to be here tonight to bring this appeal before the board. It's an issue that should have been rectified many months ago, before 5 months had passed.
Excuse me, could you speak a little more
Sure.
slowly? Yeah.
And we were forced to hire an attorney. So as background and for the benefit of those in the audience or at home who may have noticed the increased glare throughout the downtown area, the light in question here was part of a 26 light fixture changes on utility poles over the last couple of years throughout the town. And as far as we can tell, none meet the town's lighting ordinances as far as dark sky compliance and other lighting ordinance requirements. Why that is acceptable to anyone is an issue for another forum, but in this case, our property is directly and negatively affected by the Varney Road installation now before you. This particular LED fixture was changed out this past December. The original high-pressure sodium fixture was installed many years ago and was part of 2 town poles serving the 6 Varney Road Olympia Gym property. We later found out that this seems to be part of a program formerly in place where a private property owner could request fixtures be placed on public utility poles to light private property. The property owner then agrees to pay for the fixture and to pay an ongoing electricity charge to the town. I'm told this program has recently been discontinued and the request form has been removed from the town website. That form, when it was available, defined the process as a permit granted by the selectmen after a public hearing, notice and agreement from all abutters, and that any approved fixture would be in compliance with town ordinances. There is no record of such a permit now or in the past, nor does it seem the petition process was originally followed, and it certainly was not followed as part of the fixture's replacement. Although my wife has brought forward our concerns with lighting throughout the town on many occasions over the past several years, we brought our specific concerns over the subject light to town officials via email beginning on January 6th of this year. This was followed by a chain of emails and phone messages with various town officials over the next several weeks, and eventually we were told that the fixture was privately owned and grandfathered as to its use, and that any code enforcement issues should be directed to the Code Enforcement Office. We met with the town's planner, code enforcement officer, and chair of the planning board at Town Hall on February 17th. That meeting resulted in all agreeing that the fixture in question was in fact not in compliance with the town's ordinance, but given that it was a municipally owned structure, none of them had jurisdiction to compel the town to bring it into compliance. Additionally, staff noted that they believed the pole fell under the non-utilitarian pole process through the electric department as noted previously. After this meeting, we raised our objection to a fixture on town property serving solely the needs of a privately owned parking lot, and that the changes to the spread and intensity of the light did not meet being defined as grandfathered. We were told on February 26th that a complete summary of how and why the light fixture came to be there, and a zoning analysis was to be provided by the town planner, and other relevant information would be generated for review by the select board. After a few weeks, it was clear that no such inquiry was being made, a memo was never produced, and that no further action was forthcoming from the town. In late March, we engaged Attorney Jim Cowles of Walker and Varney in hopes that his inquiries on our behalf would yield a more serious response on the part of the town. After informal emails from Jim also went largely unresponded to, a formal right to know request was made on April 19th per state statute with mixed results. The required timeframes for responses were not met, but gradually we received enough information over the following weeks to determine that the light had initially been installed for private use, that there were no past or present permits, and that the town's official position is that the light is grandfathered and allowed per the municipal zoning exemption. Since filing this appeal, we have heard nothing from the town or anyone officially representing the town regarding an alternative solution to this matter. I would prefer to defer to Attorney Cowles' letter within the application as to legal interpretation and case law references, but will say from my layman's perspective that to interpret increased light spread and intensity onto surrounding property as grandfathered, and to further claim that can be done so by claiming the use of a public utility pole solely for the benefit of a private property owner as a governmental use is ridiculous, and I would hope the board would agree. Thank you for consideration of our petition. I look forward to answering any of your questions to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Does anybody have questions at this time for the applicant?
I have a question for the planner. It's relevant to the time frame of receipt of the submittal of the application. I see it was date stamped May 15th. Our ordinance says 30 days from the decision. When did you start counting? And what was the decision?
I would refer to the emails in Attorney Cowell's packet. There was a large amount of confusion and technical difficulty getting most of Mr. Cowell's emails. The town managers here can attest to that. We had a system change in the email system where I actually never received any of the emails. Town manager can testify to when he actually found the emails. I think they were in the junk folder. So the determination was actually made back, as Mr. Cook pointed out, back in the conference room long before any of the emails occurred. But for purposes of moving forward, I don't know if 30 days, I don't know if there's a definitive date as to when the decision was made. I don't think the town ever formally took an official position one way or the other than the information provided in the emails.
Well, I guess I'm not clear from the paperwork that I have, and somewhere in one of the footnotes, I think it says that let's see, the town has failed to comply with disclosure, something about the disclosure deadline. So I guess my question would be to the applicant then, have you received the material and the decision and information that you needed to proceed with this?
As far as the right to know request, as far as we provided, we trust that the town has provided everything they have in their files. I think the frustration from our perspective was that there was nothing in the files, and that there was very little information to be provided at the end of the day, other than some email information in terms of the poll's history, of which no one was aware of any prior to the swap out in December. And other than that, some information from the electric department that the poll was solely for the use of lighting the private parking lot, and that the town made money on it.
So without attempting...
So where is the decision?
That's my point. What I'm getting at is the applicant's attorney goes on and on and on to explain their case, but it doesn't culminate into saying, well, this was the town's decision. And what I could be wrong, most likely am, but we say 30 days from a decision. So when was the decision and what was it?
Do we have...
That's what I'm trying to explain. There is no formal letter, dear Mr. and Mrs. Cook, here is the decision of the town of Wolfeboro regarding your concerns.
What, so you say it's in an email. Do we have that email?
Yep, it's Exhibit 5. Exhibit 5 in the packet.
Exhibit 5, okay.
Where is it? Where?
After this, 1, 2, 3.
So as you look, it's like the last 3 or 4 pages of the whole packet.
4, 5.
So as this was explained to me, and Jim, please jump in as town manager and correct this if I go too far astray, all of the lights, quote unquote, in question existed prior to Barry Muccio being part of the municipal electric department. There's also, as Mr. Cook pointed out, no clear record as to why the lights were put in.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to find the decision.
But to that end, it's very difficult to make a formal determination. So as you can see in Exhibit 4 and 5, Exhibit 4 is the petition that's no longer on the website. Petition 5 is the email chain in question. That was the last correspondence with anyone prior to the receipt of the appeal.
So the email says about a part in red. So this is all black and white. So which part is the part in red that you respond to?
The only thing I can speak to is on page 2 of that email, after it says Tavis 1 is the question from the town administrator.
What was the date?
And then the answer, it's the same email, Suzanne, that's from April 3rd, 2023. It includes an email from, that's my email to the town manager. April 1, 23 is town manager to Barry and myself, or MED director and myself. March 13 is the email. Thank you both for taking time to meet with me on March 7. So everything seems to be, I mean, frankly, outside the 30-day window, but there is no defined decision date to prove that. Does that make sense? It appears the last correspondence that went to Mr. Cowles was in the neighborhood of April 3rd.
So
30 days from April does not make me.
I don't know whether we can go down this path, but you did not answer whether or not the nuisance itself was spoken to under the zoning.
I did specifically on page 2 of that email. And I believe, I mean, my personal opinion, that while the lights are lighting in general, private parking lots or private areas, they are also put in by the MED at the time to provide public lighting. And that's the line that you guys get to draw.
So, right, but I'm trying to find exactly where that says on page 2, the same one we're looking at.
Yeah, the second page of Exhibit 5.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer was no, as long as the town is performing a governmental function. Supreme Court has held New Hampshire municipalities are not bound by their own zoning ordinances when preventing governmental functions.
No, I get that. The question was, does the town have to follow its own zoning?
Correct.
And the answer here is no.
Correct.
And I agree with that generally. But my question was, is the nuisance that is described covered in the zoning? The light glare, the lumens?
In my reading of it, no.
Like if this were a private property, would it be covered in the zoning? If this were a private light?
Yes, if it were a private light, private lighting is covered by the zoning
And
ordinance.
it's in this section that the applicant referred to, 175-53-1?
That is, 53.1 was modified 2 town meetings ago so that the residential lighting matched that of the commercial lighting under site plan
Okay.
regulations.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yes.
So you believe that if this was a private scenario, it would fall under zoning?
Correct.
Okay. And you also believe that the town does not have to follow its own zoning, generally speaking?
Generally speaking,
Okay.
correct.
And when was that decision made?
What, that the town doesn't have to follow its own zoning?
No, that Tavis gave that information.
March 13th at
On
11:25
this
a.m.
next to last page here.
What date?
March 13th, 2023.
Is that 30 days from the decision this appeal got filed?
Absolutely not.
Then the appeal's too late. And you didn't need to send it to us. Because section 10, number 1, page 4 of our rules say 30 days.
Hold on. You asked when I made that determination. I made that determination on March 13th of this year at 11:25 in the morning. I don't know when that was shared with Attorney Cowles.
Right, this is not a formal
Correct.
decision here.
Page
This is
2 is answering
conversation
town
between
manager
staff.
questions.
That doesn't constitute a formal decision given to, given to the public file on this matter.
So are we saying there was no decision? Then maybe
That's-
they
I
shouldn't be
think-
here either,
I think that's what,
until there's a decision.
No. And if you go back to Mr. Cook's presentation, the original decision of town was months prior to this, February, I believe.
Maybe this is one that should go to council for process and procedure.
It's
Seems like
at times tricky with project denials. I know Audrey's familiar with this, but it's very simple. If somebody applies for a garage on said date and there's a denial generated for said garage, hypothetically, there's a definitive date when that occurs. In this case, there were numerous meetings with the appellant. The same thing was repeated over and over. An attorney was engaged, asked for documentation. Documentation was provided, such as it is, and questions were asked and answered, but there was no definitive.
when was that March 3rd email provided to the applicant?
I would have,
March 13th.
all of my answers went to the town manager. I don't have an email in the packet that says when the town manager corresponded with Attorney Cowles.
Mr. Cook, do you know when you received that email?
I will even run home if needed.
Excuse me, could you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, Patty Cook. And I have a full summary of every email starting January 6th of us pursuing this. I have every email back and forth that we've ever been received. And I guess my concern is that not only have we spent 5 months, 6 months dealing with this, we were forced to appoint to hire an attorney to get response and answers. So either, I don't think we should postpone this. However, I am glad to provide the full summary that I put together of every email in case this discussion happened.
We're trying to get to really a technical thing, and
I have all the dates, though, with those.
At what time did you all receive what this March 13th email between the town manager, Tavis, and Barry?
According to what I see in my...
You want to identify yourself?
Jim Pineo, Town Manager. According to what I'm seeing in my history, it was sent to Attorney Cowles April 28th.
April 28th. Does that answer your question as to timeliness? That satisfies me.
Yeah, because they filed on the, what was it, the 14th?
23rd.
15th?
It'd be May 28th would be
No, well,
30
they-
days.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Filing
May
15th.
15th.
Yep.
And it was decided on 4/28.
5/28 is 30 days.
They got the decision on April 28th, and they filed on May 15th.
So they did meet the deadline.
I don't know how they could have done better, given that there was no decision.
It's just that there's none of that information in the packet, and that's one of the first things you have to find out when
Well,
you take jurisdiction, if they met the deadline for
If
filing.
the board
You're
wants
right.
to split hairs, all of the information in the email has been consistently the information provided to the Cooks.
Right,
So
it was,
it's not that no decision was ever made, it's that the same decision was routinely made, and the Cooks ultimately decided to appeal here. But for that,
but I think, I hope we answered the question of their appeal is timely.
Timely, but here's the other part of the question. The decision involving construction, interpretation, or application of the terms of the ordinance. So I ask you the question, do you feel that that's been satisfied?
What page are you reading from?
2.
Thank you.
Just to say that the town doesn't have to follow its regulation isn't an answer.
No, but the section under which the appeal is made, 175-53-1, is in the zoning.
Can I say
Yes.
something?
Of
Okay.
course, yes.
Does the town have to follow its own zoning ordinance? Okay, if the answer to that is no, fine, but it may follow its own zoning ordinance, isn't that correct? I
Absolutely.
mean, if you had a light that changed its intensity, I don't know what the impact on the Cook's
We're
property.
off track. We're
What?
off track now. We're trying to decide.
Oh,
That
You need to get closer to your
that
mic,
goes into
please,
the
Kate.
discussion. We're still not
No,
done.
no, she's making a
guess I
point to
wanna ask
this.
the question.
Can everybody
about
get closer to the
how-
mic? I'm hearing more and more people say they can't hear.
Yeah, could you get
Okay.
closer?
I guess the question is,
You need to hear yourself. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
can you hear me now? Is this a huge kind of problem, or can we look at it a little more simply? Does the town really want to create a nuisance, having changed the bulbs to a high intensity so that it goes into somebody's living space at all hours? I guess if the problem can be solved by changing the angle or something like that, why wouldn't the town want to do that? Why do we need to get into a federal case about it, I guess is my question.
That's a good question, but that's not the question before us.
Okay.
I don't think we have jurisdiction over lights that the town puts up for the term governmental purpose,
Okay.
even if they're a nuisance
Yeah.
to houses around them. If they're street lights and they're a nuisance to the houses around them and they're up there for a governmental purpose of lighting the road, I don't think we have jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yes?
Just procedurally a question. Suzanne had made a motion that the ZBA has jurisdiction, and there was no vote on that.
I
Then
think
you
we're
let
still
the applicant-
discussing that.
Then you let the applicant speak, which suggests the public's hearing is open, which you wouldn't do if you didn't have jurisdiction. I'm just wondering where the board's at.
I didn't catch what he said.
Did we vote on whether we had jurisdiction?
Yes, I thought we did.
I thought we did.
You have the vote, jurisdiction?
I thought we did vote.
No,
We
I-
made a motion.
we didn't vote on it. I questioned it, but we did not
Oh,
vote on
okay,
it.
then we went
And he
off track.
and he
Okay,
questioned it.
is there a second to the
And Sarah-
motion?
I thought Sarah seconded it.
So did I.
I did,
She seconded it.
You didn't vote, that's my
but
thing.
we didn't vote.
Okay. Let's take a vote then. It's been motioned and seconded on whether the ZBA has jurisdiction over this application. Sarah?
So the question is whether we have jurisdiction. Have we determined whether this is a governmental purpose or not? I think that has to be determined.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
So, yeah.
So where do we go with that?
Well, go back to the,
So I was just bringing up with Kate that, in my opinion, if the town has a street light that's serving a governmental function, that doesn't fall under the zoning, although it would be nice if it did meet the zoning. But I don't think that we have jurisdiction for that because zoning deals with private property rights, period. It doesn't deal with any public property rights. It only deals with private property rights. So then the question is, because this is on a town pole causing a nuisance on a private property, serving another private property, whether it then falls under the jurisdiction of the ZBA because it's a nuisance from a private property to another private property on a public pole.
If I could add to that,
Can he add to that, or are you thinking?
well, we got a motion on the floor that's been seconded, correct?
Right.
But to Sarah's point, we need to determine whether,
I think we need to determine that. Now, do we want to send it to the attorney? I think that an interpretation of our ordinance has been interpreted by staff to get it here in front of us, and I think we do have jurisdiction.
I think so, too.
It shouldn't have come over if we didn't,
Well,
maybe. And to answer the other part, since you deviated the discussion, well, I should hold off because you've got a motion on the floor.
Sarah, are you satisfied with whether or not it's a governmental function and that you could vote on whether we have jurisdiction?
No.
Okay, what do you need to make that decision?
I think we need clarification because it is a governmental poll. It sounds like it's governmental, but it is placed on private property, so this muddies the water. I have to somewhat agree with what Kate said, that this seems like it's an exaggeration of something that's very simple. I know we have information that the person that pays for the light offered to shut it off until the tree leaves were such that it would block the light, which seemed like a somewhat reasonable accommodation. But at the same time, I also feel that if it is set at an angle such that it is obnoxious, that it would be easy enough to perhaps change that angle, still satisfy the intent of the private person that has the light, but also be not so obnoxious perhaps to someone else that lives up on the street up above.
I guess I don't agree with everything you've said. However,
It's fine.
put that aside, I don't think that that's what the decision in front of us is how could the town have treated this more reasonably from the beginning? That's not what we're here to decide. Yes.
Since we're deviating from the motion,
I don't think we are. Sarah's trying to
Well,
determine
all right.
whether she believes that this is a governmental purpose or not, or whether it
all right.
falls under the zoning authority.
So the law that was cited
Yep,
by the planner, state.
by the planner?
By the
Oh.
planner, somewhere here in the end. That he forwarded to Mr. Pinio. Do towns have to follow their regulation? I'm paraphrasing. What was it, page 2?
Page 2, middle of the page.
It goes to Kate, what she was saying, does a town or city have to follow its own zoning ordinance? And I think you can support me on this. And Kate said, may. Thank you. The town does follow its own requirements when it gets an application for site plan. Specifically, I remember one is the skate park or the ramp at the Nick. I remember when previous town manager, David Owen, yeah, he was hell-bent. He was just going to put that thing in there. I said, oh, no, you don't. You don't get to subdivide out a piece of land without a public hearing and an application.
Is that a public piece of land?
No,
It's on
privately
private
owned.
property.
Okay.
But they didn't want to follow their own regulation. They just wanted to do it.
They who? Oh, you mean
The
the town was
town.
putting in the skate park on private property?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
The Pop Whalen, the library, the public safety building, they don't do a full-blown item-by-item application, but they run it by the planning board. So we do follow to some degree, and this is before you, Tavis, we do follow to some degree a regulation and a process and a format.
So what the statute says is that when the public entity takes on a project that would otherwise be subject, the entity has to provide the planning board written notice of the project within 30 days. The planning board is to provide recommendations and suggestions. They may have a public hearing, and if they have a public hearing, they can issue non-binding conditions of approval.
That's basically what I'm saying, but we do
Well, no,
a
I'm just reading,
format.
I'm reading the statute instead of flying by my pants.
We do some format and some simulation of a process. We don't just blow it off.
No, I agree. So
All
far,
right, so
so
you
far
don't-
Wolfeboro goes, but they do not follow the regulations.
Well, you didn't bother to put that in there when you said we don't follow it. Well, we do.
No, what I said in here was the town doesn't have to follow the zoning regulations by the letter under government use of property. The question is the light in question a government use of property?
So,
Let's repeat the motion.
well, I don't know. Are we going to be able to vote on it?
Well, can somebody read it back?
Sarah Silk made a motion that the ZBA, or, I'm sorry, Suzanne Ryan made a motion that the ZBA has jurisdiction on this case, seconded by Sarah Silk.
And I would say under 674-33. And again, go back to your packet that you got from our attorney when she talks about jurisdiction. And it says construction, interpretation, application, terms of an ordinance.
So what you're saying is that the town can circumvent any zoning ordinance for the benefit of a public person to the detriment of another public person if they want to.
No,
And
I
the
did
zoning
not.
ordinance,
That
the zoning
isn't-
ordinance is not,
No, that isn't what I said, exactly the opposite of that.
okay, that doesn't what it sounded like you said.
Well, that's not what I said.
Okay. So I think whether or not the pole belongs to the town or the light belongs to the town's getting paid to light a private property, and that light is a nuisance to another private property. And I don't see how they can avoid the zoning interpretation by administering that in that manner.
So you're saying you think we do have
I
jurisdiction?
do think we do, and I said that before. I do think we have jurisdiction.
And I do too, that's why I made the motion.
Sarah, have you gotten anywhere with your ability to determine
I'll
whether
say-
we have jurisdiction or not?
Yeah, fine. I will agree that we have jurisdiction, and then we will just decide.
Well, let's just, we have
Once-
jurisdiction, and then we'll discuss.
Yes.
Okay. How about you?
Yes.
I'm a yes
For jurisdiction?
for jurisdiction.
Yes.
In this particular narrow case, yes, I have to agree that private party to private party,
Right,
we have jurisdiction.
in this case.
In this
Okay.
narrow instance.
Case by case.
There we go. Okay, so now, if we haven't already discussed the nitty-gritty, we can even discuss more nitty-gritty
Discuss more what?
about whether the town is supposed to meet the zoning ordinance when it is getting paid to supply light to a private property that has nuisance on another property.
Do we want to open a public hearing?
Yeah, I think we do. But do we have anything else to say prior?
I'd like to hear what the
this?
public has to say.
Okay. Is there anybody here that would like to speak in favor of this application, which would be in favor of the appeal? Is there anybody here that would like to speak in opposition? Are you in a favor?
Microphone. She can.
Yeah.
I'm Sabette Stroman. I'm asking for clarification
Closer.
for my own education and maybe some other people's. Why is the town getting paid to light a private parking lot? Is that what you're saying?
That's such ancient history, we don't know the answer to that, as to why that's happening.
Madam
Okay,
Chair,
okay.
Yeah.
I totally think it would be inappropriate for the town not to get paid.
Oh, right.
So they're paying the town. Gotcha.
No, the town is getting money from the person that wanted the light there.
Gotcha. Okay.
We're not paying as a town to light somebody's private thing for them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, microphone.
Just because I'm trying to follow.
Let us
My
know
name
who
is
you are.
Donna Brooks, and I just am confused. So we have a town telephone pole, light pole that has a private light on a town pole, and that guy is paying money to the town to have that pole.
I think
That
the
light on
light,
there.
the light fixture itself still belongs to the town, but
Yes.
he's paying for the use of the
Rent-
light that's
it's like
coming from the
rental.
pole,
It's like he's renting it.
renting the light.
There are,
Oh, he pays for the fixture,
And who installed the fixture?
Town.
the
Okay, all
town. Yeah.
right. I was just,
the
it's a little,
pole
it
isn't the only
just seems
thing-
very odd that we would use a town pole for a private.
Madam
this-
Chair, I think she's confused.
It's not done
This-
anymore. These are all.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, I can
Sarah?
understand why.
Yeah, okay, I think you're confused in that the pole exists and has all kinds of wires on it, and it was already there and had already other things happening with light poles, probably cable and everything else. In fact, it has 2 light fixtures on it. So they
Right.
didn't put the pole up personally for this person.
I understand that.
Okay.
That's lighting the government property.
Used to be able to do that, not anymore.
So we can't hear this, we can't record this because it's,
No, I was just pointing to the light, trying to explain the difference between the street light and the light in question.
okay. Yes?
Could I clarify one more thing? But the crux of the matter is the town chose the light that is on the pole, the type of light. And because it
The town
changed over time.
changed, upgraded the light.
Yes.
It had always
It
been
is
there.
the town's ownership of the light fixture that is
Apparently
on the
not.
pole. The town made the decision for the light fixture.
The town couldn't get the old light bulbs anymore because they were no longer available.
So I think there's really 2 issues here. A, the town decided that they would continue the program. So when the fixture there, so there was an existing light there, which we had no objection to, had been there for years. They upgraded the light to an LED fixture that's not in compliance with our zoning, tilted the light up and created more light and spread onto our property. So the town decided to continue the program and basically said that it was grandfathered, which is why they were doing it. When we had objected to the fact that it was increasing the nuisance on our property and that would not fall under grandfathering, we were then told that they consider themselves exempt from following the zoning because it is a municipal use. And then the question of municipal use is that is fine if you look at the definition for municipal use, that it requires it be a traditional governmental activity, which lighting a private property's parking lot is not a traditional, in our opinion, governmental use.
And there seems to be some other history with this in that there was previously an application process to ask the town to add a light to one of their poles to light a private area. There was an application process that some people went through, but this particular light never had that process, is my understanding. Is that right?
The original light did, the replacement did not.
The original light did have an application, and the replacement did not.
But if that is the case, we never received a copy of any of that information. So in my opinion,
to that end, I
we
don't.
were told it was historical, had been there for many, many years. There's really nothing in the files, and there was nobody at town government that recalled how the light got there in the first place.
And
Sorry.
interestingly, if it's a governmental use and not under zoning, then grandfathering doesn't apply.
That's right.
Because their grandfathering is part of zoning. So if it's claimed that it's grandfathered, then it must be covered by zoning.
Well, I don't know who made the grandfathered claim.
Well,
The
I think town staff did.
Well, and that's, I mean, there's several of us here.
I'm not saying it was you.
Yeah. So, and one of the reasons, if you're curious, that I landed on government use of property is exactly the point that Mr. Cook just made. It is not traditionally the function of a municipality to light private property. However, in Wolfeboro, at least for the tenure of the current lighting director and previous, it was the Wolfeboro practice to provide this light through that very function in the town permitting process, which was a government function offered to the public. Whether the board accepts that or not, that's the logic I use to get there, because there is no building permit process, there is no electric permit process. It's simply a town function that was
Right.
offered to the
So
public.
I think you're spreading the word government function pretty thinly over that piece of bread. The government function to accept an application is a lot different than the government function to light a piece of private property from a government pole.
Yeah, I'm not leaning on function so much as town practice.
Okay.
Whether that was right or
Practice.
wrong, that's entirely your
And apparently that practice is no longer in practice, from what I understand from the application.
Where it hits the road is that most of the lights were high-pressure sodium, which can't be purchased in that
I
format
understand that.
anymore.
Right.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Which means that the private property owner has the opportunity to apply for lighting his site with a site plan approval with appropriate lighting that does not cause a nuisance to surrounding properties.
Correct. One of the things that was discussed is where the selectmen wanted to directed this process to go. Is it going to be a policy to replace these lights when they short out? Is it going to be once it's gone, it's gone? Is there going to be a?
Well, maybe our decision can help that along.
Right.
Sarah?
Yeah, do we have anybody here that can give us any, I hate to use the word enlightenment, but
Yeah,
on
please
this
don't.
LED location sheet, exhibit number 2, because it has down light size removed 250/400, because there were 2 lights on there, and then the light size installed were 2 130s, and I'm trying to determine, does that refer to some kind of wattage? Does that just refer to a model number? Do we have any idea what that refers to?
Anybody in the audience know anything about those numbers?
All of those exhibits were provided by the applicant, so I'd look to them.
Okay.
Back.
Okay, Suzanne?
Yeah, I'd like to bring it back to grandfathering. Somewhere along the line, the light was changed to a new LED light. And because the others are no longer available, but to the grandfathering, a use of land which at the time a restriction on that use went into effect was established or vested and has not been discontinued or abandoned can continue indefinitely. Now, here's a key word. Unless it includes an activity which is a nuisance or harmful to the public health and welfare, but the use cannot be changed or substantially expanded without being brought into compliance. That's case law, that's not Suzanne Ryan.
Right, case law. And I'm not saying that every one of these replaced lights is causing a nuisance. I have no idea. If they're not causing a nuisance, maybe there isn't an issue.
Peter made a point that the light was replaced. It was also, the angle was changed. I think if the angle was not changed, and, because I imagine that the original light was fixed.
It's hard to say. These lights don't have any shielding below the bulb itself, whereas the old ones may have had some kind of shielding that directed it down, or it may have been tipped another way.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Who knows? Yeah.
I recall that old lights don't have that adjustment. They don't have a hinge that allows it to go up and down. And like Peter said, it appears that this light was moved up in order to better light the parking lot across the street. But it was adjusted up, so it's not really a direct replacement. It was adjusted to light up the parking lot and his backyard, apparently.
Right.
So, I mean, to Kate's point, is that it's as simple as just tilting the light back down.
That's a good question, and we don't know the answer to that because that apparently
Audrey?
wasn't tried.
Can I ask a quick question? We all had this picture, and it shows very clearly, right up beneath that red arrow, a pivot point,
Right.
which begs the question, why don't they just go out there, take whatever tools are appropriate, and angle this thing down?
That's, I have that question, but that's not what we're here to answer.
I think it's unintended consequences.
I think if,
I'm
I
looking
don't
for
know.
compliance with the dark sky and asking why is it not possible to come into compliance by changing the angle of this particular light? That's my question. We
Can
don't have
anybody
any
speak to
code
that from
enforcement
staff?
person here
yeah.
that can help us, I guess.
I think the substance of the appeal is, does fully shut off lighting apply? You answer one way or the other, and the town will respond. Does the ordinance apply?
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Muccio's memo dated April 4th, let's see, the sixth bulletin down there says, new street
Closer
lighting.
to your microphone, Kate.
Yeah.
I
Well,
can't
Sorry,
hear you.
thank you, sorry about that. New street lighting for non-utilitarian applications is no longer offered by the WMED due to the issues such as this. This is a pre-existing light fixture being paid for by a private entity, which we know. Unless I'm informed otherwise, we have an obligation to fix, maintain, replace as needed. Okay, fix, maintain, replace. Replace, I suppose, could include upgrading, but would there be no limit to the intensity of the light? I mean, technology is changing every day. I mean, do you want it to be like daylight? So I think that this is a sticky wicket, but we ought to be able to solve it. I don't see from all the emails that we read that anybody in the town has expressed any real willingness to solve the problem. So maybe that's why we have it.
I think it's here being solved. I think that was the course they chose, judging by what Tavis said. Sounds like to me, right? This is the course they chose to solve the problem.
As I said, unintended consequences, I have no idea.
Okay, so, no other comments from the public? Any other,
Ann had her hand up.
here we go.
Jim Pineo, Town Manager, you had previously mentioned anybody who wanted to speak in opposition of this.
Get that microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Jim Pineo, Town Manager. You had previously discussed if there was anybody opposed to this who was wanting to speak, and that's why I'm in front of you at this point. The town of Wolfeboro Municipal Electric Department was actually founded on providing lighting to the town. And that's how we got into this position of the town delivering lighting product to private entities. A long-standing history, the town has transitioned away from that for obvious reasons. However, there are still multiple customers that MED has that they provide this service to. One of the RSAs, which has been referred to me, is 17454, Governmental Use of Lands, Roman numeral 1. In this section, government use means a use, construction, or development of land owned or occupied or proposed to be owned, occupied by state, university, system, community college in New Hampshire, by county, town, city, school district, village district, or any other agent for any purpose which is statutorily or traditionally government in nature. So traditionally in nature is where we're hanging our hats on this one. The town of Wolfeboro Municipal Electric Department has traditionally offered this service. We've gone away from it for any new customers. The next thing I did is I went through and I read some of the definitions in the ZBA and planning board rules. Number one, we've got to get away from the term dark sky. It's a buzz term. We need to start using the term full cutoff so that we can speak to this accurately. The other thing that I'm having a hard time understanding, what is a nuisance to one person, it may not necessarily be a nuisance to everybody else. And I'm having a hard time gleaning what that nuisance is. I've heard the term glare. I would encourage you to look at the definition of glare in your own policies and procedures. Glare, light emitting from a luminary which is intense enough to reduce the viewer's ability to see and in extreme cases causes momentary blindness. Glare is a heavy term to be used, and I think that's quite severe. Does the light actually trespass onto the Cook's property? It probably does, but some of that I'm sure has to do with reflection of snow, and I'm not quite certain if we turn this lamp down, if we're actually going to be creating more reflection off of that snow. Again, I understand where the Cooks are coming from. I understand their displeasure with this, but from the town's perspective, for us, this is a very slippery slope. And if we don't have a good definition of what nuisance is and everybody's interpretation of it, it's problematic for us. MED went in, they replaced with what we could as close to in-kind as possible due to the fact that the previous light is no longer manufactured. So again, I think this adds a problem for us. Every time we have a change in technology, do we have to go in front of the planning board or other boards as a governmental agency for site plan review? I'm not sure. And lastly, Suzanne, you're absolutely correct. I do try to, every time I can, go in front of planning and zoning to deliver what we are bringing forward for a product. But I think if we're going to do this for every time we've got to change a light fixture in town or another piece of infrastructure, it's going to become burdensome and unwieldy to manage. I hope I've answered some of your questions, but we don't believe that we have to follow the rules as in place based on past practice of the town and essentially being grandfathered by that statute. Thank you.
Could you, Jim, I have a question first before you go. I don't know if you have the application, but under RSA 674-54, the section 1 that you just read, on the next page, the lawyer cites 2-A. Do you have an opinion about that paragraph?
What page?
This is page 11 of 12, top of page.
Could you read it out loud?
2A, any use, construction, or development of land occurring on governmentally owned or occupied land, but which is not governmental use as defined in paragraph 1, shall be fully subject to local land use regulations. And Jim, you said that then in our 674-54-1 that the purpose which is statutorily or traditionally governmental in nature, that you were pointing out that this activity in Wolfeboro is traditionally governmental.
Correct.
I guess I would ask whether there was a wider definition of traditionally governmental that might apply to that paragraph. instead of, just a unique situation in one location.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky part, because this is very unique. I mean, number one, there's only a few towns in the state of New Hampshire that have their own electric
Undoubtedly.
departments. And then that is compounded by the fact that this electric department in Wolfeboro was originally designed for delivering light only, where a lot of them were water and light. So, I mean, Attorney Cowles cites this additional RSA, but our council has cited the other one as taking precedence.
Do you know offhand how many of these lights that have been changed are the same situation where the light is paid for by a private party to light a private location, which is, providing a nuisance to another private party, as opposed to the ones that were changed that are simply lighting governmental areas? Do you have any idea how many there are?
Well, this is the only one that was claimed as a nuisance.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
I mean, it was careful how you worded that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
So there's
the
what,
nuisance
approximately-
factor is the important thing.
Right.
But I do wonder.
250, roughly?
Barry said that there are significant numbers of these out there. I do not have an exact number.
Well, I agree that probably the old ones there are, but with these ones that have been changed, just a minute. It's the ones that have been changed that I'm wondering whether there's a nuisance factor with the new ones, and to what extent that is.
I
Rather
haven't
than
heard
saying,
any.
gee, we can't change all these lights in town, it's really just the ones that have been changed that are a nuisance.
I have not heard of any other complaints.
Okay, thank you.
May I
Peter,
respond to
then-
the
then
traditional?
Ann.
May I respond to Mr. Pinio's comments while
Can
they're
you bring
still
that
fresh?
microphone up?
Yep.
May I respond to Mr. Pinio's comments?
Certainly.
So
If you're talking to the microphone.
I will do that. That's the deal. My concern is I'm hearing a lot of justification that this is traditionally what the town of Wolfeboro has done. The only thing that we know about this, we don't know when it was put in. We don't know how it was permitted. We don't know much about it. The only thing we know traditionally is that there used to be a form that if you put in these light poles, it required a selectman's hearing, it required the abutters to be notified, it required the abutters to agree that it would be allowed, and if it was permitted, it would be any installation would be in compliance with zoning. That's the only tradition that anyone can confirm was actually how this was originally done.
And did you give us a copy of that, that form that is no longer used? I know it was referenced someplace, but
In the packet, there is a copy of the form that used to be online. I think it's also, I wouldn't say this is exactly just the typeface and the way it's formatted. This does not go back long enough to be the original form or process used. I don't think anyone really knows what the original process was to put up most of these lights. It may have been, hey, Audrey, can I have a light? And MED brought a light. We don't know that.
it is
And
interesting,
I
though,
agree
that
with Mr. Cook, shame on the town for not being able to document that.
well, not just that, but it indicates that there was some benchmarks that needed to be met.
Correct.
when they were
My
put up.
understanding, and I could be misrecollecting this from Barry, this is something that he instituted because he adopted lights.
That's fine. I'm more interested in the fact that there were benchmarks that needed to be met, and
Correct.
why would those be changed just because the street light was changed? Yes.
Ann Blodgett. Clearly, you've raised more questions than answers. You guys have packets before you. We all know where the nuisance lights are around town, and we're only addressing one. Jim Pinio, I disagree with you that everyone needs to be addressed separately. Where does the town install a policy that addresses the increase in technology that's creating incredibly intense lights on lakes and on land? Thank you.
Sabat Stroman. Mr. Pinio raised the point about what constitutes glare. He said that to you. I would invite you all to go sit right where I'm sitting, right back here. Look out the window at this very glaring, hideous light and ask yourself, does this constitute glare? My understanding is that is the light that is bearing down on your house, correct? All you have to do is experience it by sitting right where I'm sitting.
And to our point, if you look at the zoning ordinance, it does to comply with the zoning ordinance, the glare does not have to be blinding. It's defined in terms of the type of light that's allowed, and it's certainly called out that the light cannot extend over the property line in any way, shape, or form. And that is a clear, definable criteria and not subject to opinion.
Well, that's candidly every street light in town goes over property lines.
Yeah. Every municipal street. I'm the most computer illiterate one of the group here, but I Googled about dark sky and lighting and so forth to get an understanding. Years ago, we had a question come before us on the ZBA, and it had to do with lumens. So I had to learn about lumens. I hope I never have to learn about them again. But the thing of it is we're in a new generation of lighting. It's something that needs to be addressed. And the good old state of New Hampshire did address it. In something that I found, surprisingly enough, New Hampshire is one of 19 states that adopted a policy and a law on lighting. And although not in detail that certainly I would like to see, it says other states have sought to encourage these types of measures, and it talks about things that they've done, you know, the cap or the full shield and all that stuff, and types of measures at local levels. New Hampshire, for example, has made it a priority to preserve dark skies as a feature of rural character. To that end, state law encourages municipalities to adopt ordinances and regulations to conserve energy and minimize light pollution. And we did adopt one, but I think we're having trouble implementing it. And maybe it needs to be looked at and rewritten and brought up to a code, whereas now we've got a problem, so we've got to fix it. It's far beyond this board and me tonight to fix it, because I don't know as though, I think we have it within our jurisdiction with Zoning Board of Appeals and Building Code. I think we could make a decision tonight. But without council's advice, we've got this council, we've got Jim, I'm sure, who's talked to council, but it's not an attorney, we're not an attorney. I think we need to send this to the attorney with the minutes and so forth and see what shakes out.
So I guess what I see is that there was a whole process with benchmarks that were supposed to be met for applications for these kinds of lights that somehow has disappeared and not maintained through the changes of these lights. There's also a lot of language in our zoning regulation about lighting and what needs to be met. So there's these two whole documents that talk about the control of lighting. And one of them is actually on the municipal side, not even private property nuisances, and the other one is private property nuisances. I don't see how we can say, well, we don't know how to fix that. We had regulations before. Let's at least meet the ones that were there before with responding to people who have nuisance complaints about the lighting that's being changed around town. And the other question, and I live up on North Main Street, and when I look out my window at night, I see a big glow, and I never used to. There's a big glow downtown all night long. And there used to be a lighting committee, and they started, I think, looking at these replacement lights because they were concerned. And I can't find any minutes or any activity for that committee, but that is where the overall issue of the public street lighting needs to come from. But from our point of view, from a zoning standpoint, I think we can rule on this particular nuisance or any nuisance that comes before us, any specific nuisance, without getting a lawyer's opinion.
Okay, I think we could work through it. I really didn't want to, but...
But put it this way, if the town attorney really thinks that we've gone off track, they have a way to remediate, a way to mitigate our decision by taking it further. So, we're doing the best we can. Five people trying to do the best we can. And I'm not sure any two lawyers can do any better, frankly.
I'm game. No matter which way we go, it can be appealed, so.
True enough.
What's interesting about this is, and I don't know if it's true in all towns, but, and again, it's this public-private governmental thing, and then the town owns, according to their attorney, the town owns 50% of the telephone pole in question, distinguishes utilities from its reasoning since the same are often privately owned and operated. Maybe we just shouldn't be in the business.
I think that might be why that application was removed from the site.
The money looks good, but I wouldn't trade the money for what you just described about downtown lighting up. And I live up in Cotton Mountain, and I can tell you, when the sun goes down and the lights come on, it's a whole different look in looking downtown.
Chuck, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry?
Do you have anything to add?
Well, I think you're right. I think technology has changed, and I think what they've done, what Barry has done through the electric department, is substitute an LED light for the old sodium lights. And it turns out the new LED lights run on lower power, but they generate a brighter light. In most instances, that's a plus. In this instance, it still looks to me like we changed the light, but we also angled the light. I guess the question is, what jurisdiction do we have, and what is the actual question that we have to answer tonight?
I think the
what I'd like to
question
know.
when we get around to making a motion is, does the town have to remove the nuisance?
Well, does the town
Nuisance.
have to comply with the regulations?
Well, yes, but here is the regulation that we're most concerned about right now is the nuisance caused by the light generated onto another piece of property.
Right. But it's not necessarily remove the light, it's remove the nuisance.
Exactly, yes. So
Right,
it's not
so-
necessarily remove the light, it's remove the nuisance. Right.
We don't
Okay.
have to tell them how to fix it. We
Right.
just have to say, fix it.
The
Right.
nuisance is something
The point
that,
being, if you make a motion to uphold the appeal, the town is thereby required to follow the zoning regulations. If you deny the appeal, the
Right.
town does not have to follow the zoning regulations. That's really all you're voting on.
Thank you.
that's correct. Do you have anything else to add? If you do, get next to your mic. Okay.
We're going to close the public hearing.
Shall we close the public hearing?
I would move to close the public hearing.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Is there a motion?
Yes.
Move that the town should,
I would move that the town, on case 4AAD23, Cook's appeal of administrative decision, Chapter 175, 53-1, that the town,
that we uphold, that we uphold the appeal.
yeah,
Okay.
that the town would uphold the appeal of said stated
ZBA.
appeal and be required to remediate the nuisance as,
By meeting the zoning ordinance for lighting?
yeah.
Okay.
So it's a motion to uphold appeal 4AA23, or a motion to approve 4AA23 to uphold the appeal, thereby requiring the town to follow the zoning ordinance.
No, he's.
And remediate the nuisance.
She's taken the minutes. What did she get?
I think he's writing the word for word. He's writing the word for word.
She is.
He.
He is?
You both are.
She'll ultimately be doing the minutes. I'm just,
Yeah.
you both said different things. I just want to hear what the board's motion is.
Can you read back what you've got?
That was a motion to approve 4AA23 to uphold the appeal and require the town to follow the zoning regulations. And you can add to remove the nuisance or to change the light or wherever.
We can leave it that large and not identify nuisance because nuisance is in the zoning ordinance.
Well, but that's why they brought it, because it's a nuisance.
But the nuisance is in the zoning ordinance, so are we just... Do you want to just say the nuisance and leave out the other parts of the lighting zoning ordinance, or do you want to have them
Because
meet the zoning
the
ordinance?
question is really, does the town have to follow the ordinance or not? The town took the position that 674-54 says no, under the traditional practice. That was appealed, and you just made a motion to uphold the appeal.
Madam Chair, I think Tavis is kind of oversimplifying. I think yeah, I'm just wondering about what Tavis was saying might be an oversimplification. In this particular instance, if they may not have a light that is governmental in nature, but we're not saying that they have to remediate every light. Is that correct?
It's correct because
That's why it's this
it's
case,
just
no.
the
Okay.
appeal for this case.
Okay, I wanted to make certain.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you can make it as specific, I'm only saying what I'm hearing. If you want to make it specific to 6 Varney as reference, so be it. If you want to say in general, these lights are not government
I think we've
functions.
agreed we're going for this particular appeal.
I'll just
We might hear other appeals that are exactly the same, but let's stick
So
to this
this
appeal.
would be a motion to approve 4AA23 to uphold the appeal as submitted, and that the town must follow the zoning regulations for the light at 6 Varney.
I want to keep that word nuisance in there.
For the nuisance light at 6 Varney.
And remediate the nuisance of the light at 6 Varney.
Remediate the nuisance.
Right.
It's
I
at
I don't know that there isn't other things in the Wolfeboro lighting that we wouldn't necessarily require them to do. I don't know the lighting ordinance well enough. If it has some kind of restriction that we're unaware of, that's not what we're really listening to tonight.
So as a motion to approve 4AA23 to uphold the appeal as submitted and require the town to follow the zoning regulations in remediating the nuisance at 6 Varney Road.
I like it.
So moved.
That was, you can
Sarah already
second.
did.
Well, okay.
Do a roll call vote, please.
Is there a second?
Second. Sarah?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
No.
See, he
Yes.
didn't catch what you said.
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Oh. It being 9:30.
Madam Chairman,
open,
You know what I'm about to say, I think.
we need to open it to continue it.
Yeah, I'd like to, for procedure purposes, have you open the next case, maybe take a introduction as to what they'd like to do, and then continue it to a date certain, given this late hour.
Madam Chair, I think I need to recuse myself from the next one. I can read my clerk's thing, but I don't want to sit for the hearing. I have made comments about a similar situation for this particular piece of property as a member of the Conservation Commission, although not this application, and I also am associated with an organization that's in a butter.
Okay, so accepted. Are there any other recusals before I fill her seat? Sabette, would you be willing to fill in for
Yes.
Sarah? And this would be next month,
Yes.
or next meeting, whenever that might be. Yes.
Can I ask a question just for the people that are in the audience? Are you going to be taking public input tonight, or are you guys going to be pushing that to another night?
I don't think we'll be taking it tonight.
No, the motion was to have them give an overview and then continue to date certain.
It's just that I would like to hear from everybody who wants to speak, and we try not to go past 10, so.
We did try to warn off some of the people that might happen, given that we had an overburdened agenda.
I think the issue is that once we open it and we hear an overview, the board is going to have a lot of questions for the applicant before we hear from the public, and that's going to take a
You
while.
going to step down?
Yes, I'm just going to read the clerk thing and step away. I already said that. Are you ready, Audrey, to proceed?
I'm still apologizing.
Oh,
Okay.
let me know when
I
you...
I think we should just be clear with them. If they're not going to get public input tonight, they can at least leave now if they want to, and then they're not sitting around for another half an hour, 45 minutes.
So
I think our intention is not to take public input
I think
tonight.
before people leave, you want to come up with your continued to date.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to open the case. So Sarah, would you please read it?
Laconia Area Community Land Trust, DBA Lakes Region Community Developers, Beck Drive, Tax Map 175-20-1, Case 03-SE23, public hearing for special exception under Chapter 175, Section 72J, multifamily dwellings, and Chapter 175, Section 27.2 of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance for modification of a special exception granted in August 2008, modified June 2009 to allow 30 affordable rental units in place of the 20 that were approved. Formal submission, public hearing, site visit to be held at 6 p.m.
Oh, go ahead.
So
Okay.
is that the agenda doesn't match the description, so I'm just concerned that it's not.
What's different?
So the application asks for modification of an existing special exception to permit 38 rental units in multifamily format where 20 single-family for-sale units were approved. That's a significant difference between what's on the agenda. I just want to point that out, that
You have to understand the brass tacks. There's more rental units than Phase 3 has. So Phase 3 was originally approved as 20 single-family units. It's going to have 30 units in it.
they were approved for 20 single-family for-sale units, not
Correct.
for rent units.
I don't know what the board's concern there would be, but it's all affordable housing. But
Well, I don't either, but I guess I'll be asking that question.
Would you like me to finish?
Yeah.
The clerk report? Okay. At 6 o'clock, there indeed was a site viewing with Chuck, Suzanne, Sarah, Luke, and Audrey at Harriman Hill with Kathy Barnard from the Planning Board, also from Harriman Hill, Steve Dwyer, Lakes Region Community Development, Kevin Leonard from North Point Engineering, Bonnie Medico, Eastern Lakes Housing Coalition, and Carrie Duran, Lakes Region Development, and also a Harriman Hill resident. And I will be stepping down.
Yes, Suzanne?
If we are going to continue the meeting, and as Luke suggested, if we do that, we should let people know they could leave now and not sit through the presentation. We should do date, time, place of the continuance before anybody leaves this room. And so that's why I brought out my calendar.
Me too.
So the next meeting is July 3rd?
And we don't have to advertise it, so we could have it in 2 weeks if you want.
You could.
Right, and July 3rd, I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but that's probably a long weekend for a lot of people. Does that matter?
Why don't we have it still in June?
We can. I'm just saying our next meeting is a very awkward night.
Yeah, yeah.
So 26th?
Sounds good.
Any problem with the 26th for anybody on the board?
I can't.
Okay, that's a
Would
problem.
be the alternate.
Well, is there another?
Might want to consult with the applicant, too, on the date before just picking
Yeah.
one.
Well, we got to figure out what we can do.
How about the 19th?
I can't do that either.
Huh?
I can't do that either. but
Is
Kate can do it.
Juneteenth a holiday for this town? No. Okay. You can't do the 19th?
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm gone for 2 weeks.
Yep.
Can you do it by
That's,
television?
No,
we're going
By-
to,
I'll be in Spain.
why don't we, unfortunately, I think we'll have to switch alternates, but I think 26 would probably be the better date if the applicant can do that.
Better for me.
I do too, because we don't want to drag
Right.
this through the end of July.
June 26th?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you'll need to be sitting as the alternate. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. And can you find out if the applicant can you speak to the 26th?
Good evening, Megan Carrier. I represent the applicant. You can all hear me, right? Most
If you're
important
a
thing.
little
I can't
closer.
hear
A little closer, okay. So the 26th is fine with all of us. And I don't know the board's position on this, but we're fine with just continuing the entire hearing to the 26th rather than opening it tonight. I'm a little bit concerned about information being lost or forgotten between the two meetings, and I want to, keep things as together as possible and just avoid any confusion associated with splitting it. So we're completely fine with just continuing the entire hearing. That being said, if the board does want to hear sort of opening remarks on the project, we are happy to do that, but I probably would want to repeat them again at the next meeting just to make sure that everything's on the record, and I don't want to waste your time.
Yeah, I'd prefer not to go into it tonight, personally.
If they just wanted to do a brief overview of the general overview of what it is, without all the engineering and all the, just what, how many units, rental, not rental, freestanding housing, just speak to it without being too technical.
No, Suzanne, I'd rather not start that
This is
process.
only a preliminary consultation.
Right, because we're going to hear this all again.
So,
And it's already in.
If the applicant wants to do it next time, that's fine with me. It's up to them. If they feel that their case is going to be presented better by doing it all in one meeting, then I'm good with it.
She's just going to redo it again next week anyway.
Oh, okay, all right, fine.
Would anyone feel better if it were renoticed for the 26th?
Yeah.
7 o'clock?
Well, yeah. I'm
I think it
assuming-
should be renoticed so people, the public also know about
Well,
it.
that's my concern. If I mean, the statute says you can continue an open public hearing, but I understand the applicant's also willing to continue. But
I'm fine with renoticing if, I mean, I think that's good. The more, the
it
better.
might not meet the 10 days and all of that, but
Right.
at least it'll be a
Doesn't
fresh
have to.
reminder in the paper that
Yep,
it's coming on the 26th at 7.
yes. Right, a lot of people who weren't hearing tonight might think it's the 3rd, when it's good to renotice it
Correct.
for the
Okay, I'm
26th.
okay with that. And are we going to get this application and information online so the public can go online and look at it? Or do
Working
we
with the
want them to come into your office in a big, long line of people?
Yes, the hordes of people that come in. Yes. Right now, I'm working with the town manager on that. So far, no one has come in, other than you.
Okay, so,
So is that a motion to continue this to?
26.
at 7
Here at
o'clock.
Town Hall
I'm
at
asking
7
because the
o'clock.
board didn't do it. I know what the numbers are.
Make a motion.
I make a motion to continue the Harriman Hill application to the 26th here in the Town Hall to commence at 7 o'clock.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll make another motion to adjourn at 9.
Before you, do you want to meet on the 3rd if there is a case? I cannot be here, but that does not preclude you from meeting. I just need to be able to inform people.
If there
I
is a
guess we're gonna
case,
have
we
to-
should meet, right?
Well, you, at your last meeting, you decided to meet even without cases to work on rules of procedure. I'm just wondering if that's,
I had wanted to talk about setting another date every month to work on rules of procedure, but I don't think that works on the 3rd of July.
No.
I think we should meet like July 15th
Well,
and August 15th.
we can decide through email on an alternate date. I just
Okay.
need to know whether the board
What if
wants to
there
meet.
is a case, though, that comes up between now and, could we schedule a regular meeting for the,
That-
if
Yeah,
we,
I'm
Let's
just
do that.
declaring I can't be here on the 3rd. I can
Let-
get
let's-
materials
do
to
the
you,
10th,
but-
hypothetically?
Be here on the 3rd.
Let's schedule a regular meeting in July for the 10th, pending applications. Even not pending applications, we can work on the rules of procedure, right?
Sure.
Because I know we're all waiting to do that number
Just
8.
not the 10th,
Yeah.
because that's Conservation Commission.
Not the 10th,
Yeah,
Please. All right.
17th?
it's a fine.
Motion to adjourn?
No, because we're trying to pick a July date. So the 17th,
I'm
and
good
that's
with-
a long month, then we still have 3 weeks until the August date, right?
Yeah.
The way it's falling. So can we agree to meet on July 17th?
Just do it. Who's here is here, and who isn't,
Can I
isn't.
can I
Or an
clarify though?
application, too, yeah.
If there is a case that comes up, we will still meet
It
on
will go
July
to the
3rd.
17th.
No,
We will not.
No.
We're
It will
moving
go
to
to the
July
17th.
17th.
Okay.
Yep.
So the 7/3 became a 7/17 meeting.
Now, can I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Wait.
It's not adjourned yet. We have to agree on July 17th, right? We did.
We didn't take a vote.
Hey, we got a motion going to adjourn.
Thank you for asking. Yes, it is.
Great. And all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.